On October 1st, 2025, the Australian government did something insane. They made it so virtually any first home buyer could enter Perth's property market with just a 5% deposit. Within 2 days, properties under $500,000 completely vanished from the market. Perth prices surged 1.6% in September alone. But here's what they're not telling you. This exact pattern has created housing bubbles that destroyed markets in the US, UK, and Ireland in 2008. And according to one of the 12 economists who actually predicted that crash, Perth is heading for the same catastrophic collapse. His name is Professor Steve Keen, and by the end of this video, I'll show you exactly why he says these government schemes are the biggest con job in Australian history. Let me show you what the government is selling you. Right now, if you're a first home buyer in Perth, the government is offering you what sounds like an absolute dream. Buy a home with just 5% deposit. That's $42,500 instead of $170,000 for a median Perth home. No income caps. Everyone qualifies. Save around $28,000 in lender's mortgage insurance. Property price cap raised to $850,000 in Perth, plus a $10,000 first homeowner grant if you buy new, plus stamp duty concessions. Zero stamp duty under $500,000. On the surface, this sounds incredible. Lower deposits, government grants, stamp duty savings. What's not to love? But here's the problem, and this is where most people get it completely wrong. These schemes don't increase housing supply. They only increase demand. And when you pump more buyers with more borrowing power into a market with limited supply, basic economics tells you exactly what happens next. But before I reveal what Professor Keen discovered about why this destroys markets, let me show you what's already happening in Perth right now. While the government celebrates, Perth's market is showing terrifying warning signs. As of October 2025, dwelling values in Perth rose 1.6% in a single month. That's the fastest growth of any capital city. Over the year, Perth prices are up 7.5%, hitting record highs. The median Perth house price just hit $810,000, up from $600,000 in 2023. But here's where it gets really interesting. First home buyer Brooke Rolfe told reporters she used to see a few options when filtering for affordable homes. 2 days after the October 1st scheme launched, there was not one house anymore. Properties that used to take weeks to sell, now moving in just 12 days. Active listings have dropped nearly 30% year on year. Perth's rental vacancy rate sits at just 1.3%, one of the lowest in the country. Weekly rents averaging $685. The price to income ratio has jumped from 5.8 times in 2023 to 6.4 times in 2025. And according to industry experts, 24% of new Perth borrowers are already spending more than 35% of their income on repayments, the threshold for mortgage stress. This is before the crash. So what does Professor Keen say is actually happening here? This economist predicted the 2008 crash 18 months before it happened. Here's what he sees coming. Professor Steve Keen is one of only 12 economists globally who actually warned of the global financial crisis 18 months before it hit. While everyone else said she'll be right, Keen was screaming that a housing collapse was inevitable, and he's been warning about Australia's housing bubble for over a decade. Here's what he discovered that changes everything you think you know about house prices. Mainstream economists think banks are just intermediaries. They transfer money from one person to another, so debt shouldn't matter. But Keen proved they're wrong. In plain English, when banks lend more money faster, house prices explode. When they lend less or slow down, house prices crash. And here's the terrifying part about Perth. Australia has the second highest household debt in the entire world. Perth households are some of the most indebted on the planet. And what do governments do whenever there's danger of falling house prices? They pump it up again with schemes exactly like the ones we just discussed. Professor Keen put it bluntly. This is a policy designed to inflate asset prices to benefit old people at the expense of young people. It gives an illusion of economic progress when it's actually locking the country into a form of penury. But wait, hasn't Perth been through this before? And didn't it survive? Actually, no. Let me show you what really happened last time. 2008 to 2020, Perth's lost decade. The early 2000s saw Perth's property boom, fueled by the mining sector. Prices surged. Workers flooded into WA. Properties sold fast. Everyone thought the good times would last forever. Sound familiar? Then came 2008. The global financial crisis hit, mining demand dropped, and Perth's market corrected. But here's the critical part most people don't know. Perth's boom lasted longer than it should have because the Australian government intervened with massive stimulus. In October 2008, Steve Keen appeared on ABC warning that Australia faced its own savage correction. 6 days later, the Rudd government doubled and trebled the first home buyer grant, up to $21,000. Victoria added another $14,000 $100,000 on top. It worked temporarily. People rushed back into buying. Credit-based demand surged. Australia avoided recession during the GFC. But the price Australians paid, and this is the price paid by young Australians rather than rich old Australians, was higher house prices, making it even harder to get into the market. And Perth, after the government stimulus wore off and mining investment declined, Perth experienced a brutal market correction. Prices dropped significantly. It took until 2020, 12 years, for the market to stabilize. Now we're in another boom. Same conditions, same government interventions, same rising mortgage debt. But economists are warning, when this boom ends, the crash will be worse. Here's how government schemes are actually destroying your future. Professor Hal Pawson, Director of Housing Research at UNSW, put it bluntly, the first homeowner grant is one of the least recommended ways to assist first home buyers. Research from UNSW, RMIT, and University of Sydney found the scheme added to demand and pushed up property prices, despite more than $20 billion of public funds being spent between 2010 and 2020. The impact of these policies over time has been to do the exact opposite of what they claim to do. Back in 1988, almost 44% of Australians owned their home outright. Less than 30% had a mortgage. Fast forward to 2018, Australians who own outright fell from 43% to 31%. Those with mortgages rose from 30% to 38%. Renters increased from 17% to 27%. These policies have reduced home ownership, increased the number of people with mortgages, and increased the percentage renting, exactly the opposite of what politicians claim they're trying to achieve. So if these policies don't help first home buyers, who do they help? Existing property owners. Every scheme inflates their asset values. Politicians like Premier Roger Cook. Property owners who benefit personally. Banks. Larger mortgages mean more lending, more interest, more profits. The construction industry. Builders love inflated prices. The financial sector. Mortgage brokers, real estate agents. Everyone profits from higher prices. Who loses? First home buyers, renters, young Australians, key workers, the future of the country. This isn't help, it's a con job. Perth's boom is already showing the exact patterns that preceded the last crash. Let me show you the warning signs that are flashing red. Right now, sign number 1, price growth slowing. The forecasts, Perth house prices will grow 5 to 10% in 2025, down from 24.2% in 2024. That's a massive deceleration. Sign number 2, days on market. Increasing properties that were selling in 8 days at the peak are now taking 12 days. This is a key leading indicator that demand is weakening. Sign number 3, affordability constraints. Perth's price-to-income ratio hit 6.4 times. The median home now costs more than 6 times the median household income. Sign number 4, record mortgage stress. 24% of new borrowers already spending over 35% of income on repayments before any crash. In Perth's last boom that ended in 2014, these exact patterns emerged before the 5-year downturn. In Sydney's 2016 boom, days on market started rising and vacancy rates climbed before prices crashed in 2017. Investor Kit, a property research firm, identified these as the 4 indicators that historically signal the end of property booms, and all 4 are appearing in Perth right now. But here's what terrifies economists most. When Perth's bubble bursts, the people these government schemes claim to help, first home buyers, will be destroyed. Let me show you exactly what happens. Based on Perth's 2014 to 2020 downturn and international crash data, here's what's coming. Price corrections of 15 to 30%. Based on historical data, a 15 to 30% correction from peak prices is realistic. For a home bought at $850,000 at the peak, that means a drop to $595,000 to $700,000 to $22,500. Immediate negative equity. Anyone who bought with a 5% deposit at the peak will be in negative equity immediately. You'll owe more on your mortgage than your home is worth. You can't sell without bringing cash to settlement. You can't refinance. You're trapped. Forced sales cascade. When people lose jobs during the mining downturn, they can't make mortgage payments. Forced sales increase. As more properties hit the market, prices drop further. It's a vicious cycle. Rental market collapse. Perth's last downturn saw rental drops of 30%. Investors who bought for cash flow suddenly have negative gearing properties with falling values. Many sell, flooding the market with even more supply. Economic contagion. Construction slows. Real estate agents lose jobs. Mortgage brokers struggle. Retail spending drops because people are in mortgage stress. yes, the entire WA economy contracts. And here's the cruelest irony. The people these government schemes claim to help, first home buyers, get hit hardest. They bought at the peak with minimal deposits. They have no equity buffer. They're most likely to face job losses in a downturn. According to the Bankwest Curtin Economic Centre, 210,000 Western Australian households already view their housing as unaffordable, up from 110,000 just 2 years ago. When the crash comes, many of these households will face financial ruin, and the government schemes that encouraged people to buy with 5% deposits will be directly responsible. Here's what the economist who predicted 2008 says about Perth. When asked about Australian house prices, Professor Keane expects around a 20% fall, but here's the critical part. The level of fall before governments start to respond to the pain is of the order of 20%, he said. Then they'll step in to rescue the bubble again. Each time there's been a potential fall in house prices, the government's response is to pump more money into the market through first home buyer schemes or lower interest rates. Keane calls it what it is. It's an insane policy, but it's indicative of what's been done worldwide. His verdict on schemes like the 5% deposit guarantee, it's locking governments into wanting rising house prices. If you borrowed $1 million and the government buys 1/3 of it for you, that makes the price close to $1.5 million. It's just another way to keep house prices inflating. According to Keane, these aren't designed to help first home buyers. They're designed to protect existing property owners, keep banks profitable, and maintain the illusion of economic growth. Perth's housing crash isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. The warning signs are already appearing, slowing price growth from 24% to 5 to 10%, rising days on market, affordability at record crisis levels, price to income ratios that are completely unsustainable. The government schemes being marketed as help for first home buyers are actually making the bubble bigger, pushing more young Australians into dangerous levels of debt and setting up conditions for a catastrophic crash. We've seen this pattern in America, in the UK, in Ireland, in Spain, in Australia in 2008, and in Perth specifically from 2014 to 2020. The ugly truth is these schemes aren't designed to help first home buyers. They're designed to protect existing property owners, keep banks profitable, and maintain the illusion of economic growth, while younger Australians are locked out and buried in debt. If you're a first home buyer considering using these government schemes to buy in Perth right now, understand what you're walking into. You're buying at the peak of a boom with minimal equity as a buffer in a market showing clear warning signs of an impending crash. You're not being helped. You're being used to prop up the bubble for a little bit longer. I'll be covering Perth's property market every week, breaking down the data, exposing government policy failures, and tracking the warning signs of the coming crash. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video where I'll reveal which Perth suburbs are most at risk when the crash comes, and which areas might actually hold value. The government is lying to you about these schemes. Economists who predicted 2008 are warning you about the risks. History is screaming at you about what happens next. The question is, are you listening? The data doesn't lie. The patterns are clear, and the clock is ticking. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.